You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. I do not have a take for you. My take is actually overtaken by certain events. If you have been following Bright Simmons on the Scarab, piercing through the deeps, he has written about the shadowy forces haunting Ghanaian industrialization. And his write-up has to do with a setting, hotel in the plush city of Accra that was getting some 4 million tax exemption, allegedly so that it can do 1D, 1F work by way of employing people when it is set up. The company is called the Formac Limited, and Parliament approved that exemption for them. In the report authored by Parliament, it states unequivocally that the tax exemption for that hotel was for the purposes of, as it were, advancing the 1D, 1F project. And this has got people really mad. And I got really mad about it. And Bright Simmons writes about this and actually digs up about this company and tells us about how this company has been flagged a number of times by the Auditor General in millions of cedis and dollars that it has to pay to the state, or allegations that it had done some work needed to be paid, all of which appear to have been found to be funny and not substantiated. Well, this morning, the Kweku Kwarteng, who is ranking on that committee, chair of that committee rather, has issued a statement and explained that the finance ministries, or the document that went to Parliament and the agreement that led to the process for that hotel to be given that exemption, is under the GIPC project to encourage industrialization and not in 1D, 1F project. And he puts the document, shares the document, and you read and understand that it's not really about 1D, 1F. But what they did in Parliament speaks to 1D, 1F. And so that was the mistake. Otherwise, people were really mad that a poor country like ours were giving tax exemptions, obviously, to cronies, and perhaps politically exposed people. Just for what purpose? Right. Let me introduce my guest to you. Bright Simmons is Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa. He joins us via Zoom. Martin Pebu is a rights activist, is a lawyer. He joins us also. John Abdullahi Jinapor is MP Yape Kusogu and former Deputy Power Minister. Also, he is right here in the studio. We also have Dr. Abdul Tia Kabiru Mahama, who is member, New Patriotic Party Communications Team, Economist and Technical Advisor, Office of the Vice President. Dr. Srebo Kwaku is Director, Electoral Services at the Electoral Commission, will join us at the right time. We are beginning with the discussion regarding a review of the Bank of Ghana's justifications offered for the 60.8 loss and the 250 headquarters property that they are putting up. The justifications they have given. Are you satisfied with them? So you can join us on Twitter and all our handles. Share your views with us. Are you satisfied with Dr. Ernest Addison's explanations that have been offered in respect of the two situations? Are you in support of the manner in which the EC wants to go about the limited registration of voters? And do you buy the Imani ASEP indictments of the government, so to speak, on the GENSA GMPC deal? Share your views with us, and we'll share them with the rest of the world. I welcome my guests. Good morning. Welcome to the show. You joining us by Zoom, you're also welcome. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So you are already aware of these matters. So let's begin on the question of the Bank of Ghana and its, debts that it has incurred, for which it says they are technical losses, and so we shouldn't really be bothered about it. That they are policy solvent, and so there are no problems. 60.8 billion from a year when they had made about, 1.4 billion in profits. But the governor says they are not a profit-making institution. We should not be worried. He actually says that, but for what they did, Ghana would have gone the Sri Lankan way. Do you recall what happened in Sri Lanka? And even presently how they are suffering? You couldn't even buy fuel. Fuel was being rationed. It's only doctors or some essential workers had the opportunity to buy fuel, meaning you couldn't go to work, and so on. And you know how the citizens, the populace, took over the presidential palace out of anger and starvation, so to speak. Let's hear Dr. Philip Adam, Ernest Addison.
They've placed a high premium on this particular debt scenario involving that Bank of Ghana, as that was the only scenario that was going to allow the government to meet the debt threshold that would allow Ghana's IMF program to proceed for board approval. The Bank of Ghana accepted this proposal on that basis, given how crucial it was to secure the fund-supported program and the benefits that would inure to the economy, as it would help to reset the economy and prevent a total collapse with much broader socio-economic implications. A Bank of Ghana board meeting was therefore arranged to get the board pass a resolution to this effect. The bank acted in good faith for the broader interests of Ghana's economy. The debt included all the legacy debts of Government of Ghana dating back to 1992, including the overdraft to 2022, overdraft to Cocoa Board, the COVID-19 bond, and even Bank of Ghana holdings of Telecom Malaysia bonds and the Tema Oil Refinery bonds issued by government. As of 2015, the accumulated claims on government and Cocoa Board were about 13 billion Ghana cedis. The debt, therefore, is not about recent debt alone. Almost all lending from the IMF, including the external credit facility and rapid credit facility during the COVID-19 pandemic, and financial sector resolution bonds, have been presented in the recent discourse as Bank of Ghana lending to government. This is not factual. It is important to state that losses reported were technical losses arising from the haircut and the application of accounting standards, in particular IFRS 9, to estimate expected credit losses over the tenor of the government debt held by Bank of Ghana. It is not money lost by the Bank of Ghana through its operations in 2022. Rather, one should look at this as a reflection of the total cost of the economic and social crisis that the country has faced over the years, and an attempt to resolve a major structural problem of the Ghanaian economy. The bank then began to plan the building of its new head office, taking into consideration the need to ensure that the building meets all the requirements of a modern central bank of international standards, similar to central bank head office buildings in Abuja and Dakar, and includes provision for data centers, currency processing centers, vaults, and other sensitive installations. It is not just a simple, ordinary building. Let me re-emphasize that the bank followed all the necessary public procurement processes in this endeavor. No procurement laws were broken. The decision to commence construction was taken as far back as 2019, when the bank generated profits. Appropriations for the head office were made each year from profits made in 2019, 2020, and 2021. The project has therefore been going on for over 3 years. The DDEP only took place in January 2023. If we were to be taking the decision today, building a legacy head office would not have been a priority. However, this is a project that has been running for 3 years and about 50% complete.
Right, so you just heard the Bank of Ghana, the governor there, beginning to moderate the discussion. And so let me bring in Bright Simmons. Thank you very much, Bright Simmons of Imani, Africa. Are you with us, Bright? Great, thank you very much. Yeah, so you listened to the governor, and you have done an analysis of his entire statement. Here on Joy News, our team at PM Express have done their own analysis, found certain inaccuracies and certain discrepancies as far as the statement that he made are concerned in respect of the figures and even in respect of the headquarters building that he was talking about as to the time they started it, and with hindsight, they would not have started it. We'll share that with you shortly. But let's begin with you, Bright. What has been your review of his presentation? What are the problems with the justifications that he offered? They sound really, reasonable, aren't they?
Thank you, Samson. So yes, a group of Imani analysts, once we received the invitation from your production team, have been poring over the data that was presented, the information that was presented, and I'm going to do a quick summary of their findings. I hope that is fine.
That's fine.
Okay, so if they can project my slides onto the screen.
It's being projected. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. So as you know, we've had some background with the Bank of Ghana in terms of some of its policy missteps. That's not what we are discussing today, but it's important that we put it into context that some of us in civil society have been trying to get the attention of the nation about some of the policies that the Bank of Ghana has been pursuing over the last couple of years, which are not always very sound, like the forced recapitalization of banks, where they forced banks to dramatically increase stated capital, whereas, in fact, it was capital adequacy that was a challenge, as we saw. Some of the biggest banks in the country were the ones that went down. And when time came to, it wasn't the smaller banks, actually, that had the problem. So given that fact, we were not that surprised when eventually the country kind of caught up with some of the things that we've been saying for a long time, as far as the central bank is concerned. But I'll now go to the issues that are for discussion today. There are two major parts to this. One is, of course, the losses that it announced in its annual report for 2022. And then the second one is some of the specific projects that have then, in the course of the discussion, have come up, particularly the issue of the procurement concerns surrounding the headquarters project. So starting with the losses, the balance sheet losses that we've been discussing all along, we have to admit that central banks do make losses. It's not entirely impossible that a central bank will make a loss in a year. The way in which a central bank might make losses is traditionally in about three forms. One is, as we've discussed, capital and valuation losses. The central bank has some assets. Some of those assets can include government securities, like the bonds that they were holding there's government of Ghana bonds. And if there is any development that requires you to revalue those assets, you have to recognize it in your profit and loss statement because it passes through. So there are ways in which, because the central bank holds assets and those assets could be revalued, losses could accrue. So that's true. The central bank in some countries are also very developmental, like in Nigeria, and they give subsidies and they give money to various business actors in the economy, and they could lose money through that effort as well. And then lastly, there are operational expenses, like we are seeing now with some of the challenges that have come up with the headquarters project, et cetera. But more critically, the operational expenses that are of interest tend to be the ones that are connected to monetary policy. So, for instance, the Bank of Ghana tries to maintain the currency value and things like that. And doing so, it conducts what is normally called quantitative easing and other such activities. If there are changes in the market, like interest rates change and things like that, or their interest income is not rises because of general rising of interest rates, so they have to pay more to the banks for the assets that the banks hold to them, or for any of those kind of reasons, a central bank can also make losses. So that is not in dispute. The second issue, which is very critical, is that we have to pay attention to two key factors when it comes to these losses. What is the scale of the losses and why? So our analysis is based on these two issues. How big are the losses compared to other losses in other central banks in other parts of the world? And what were the causes? To us, if we want to assign blame to the Bank of Ghana, that is where we need to look. How bad were the losses and why did the losses emanate? So you look at some countries that in the past have had losses, especially in the 90s, for various reasons, and the IMF tracks this. And you see that generally the losses can be computed as a percentage of different numbers that put the loss in perspective. So one way you can look at the loss is that, okay, what is the percentage of the loss? What is the size of the loss as a percentage of that central bank's equity? You can also look at it as a percentage of the government's expenditure. If you look at it that way, the Bank of Ghana losses are incredible. So for instance, as a percentage of expenditures in Ghana, they were roughly 35% of exchanges of the prior year. So that's a huge amount compared to, as you can see on the screen, Brazil 1.5%, Czech Republic 1.8%, Thailand 7.7%, etc. So to have a 35%, to have a loss, that is about 35% or 1/3 of the expenditure of the government in the year before, the total expenditure of the year before, is dramatic. The other way is also to look at it in terms of equity, and there it's even mind-boggling because the Bank of Ghana has such a tiny equity that when you express as a percentage, it makes no sense, like 600,000% or something like that. So we're not even going to go there. But in short, the Bank of Ghana's losses is so wild that it requires better investigation than so far they've been willing to concede. You can also look at the central bank losses as a percentage of the gross domestic product, the country's total output, economic output in a year. And if you do that, and you do the benchmarking, the Bank of Ghana's attempt to suggest that these losses are ordinary or routine because other places are also making losses, all of a sudden makes no sense because the scale in other places compared to what we are seeing in the Bank of Ghana's case is dramatically different. So for instance, the whole of the Euro area, if you strike an average of what were the losses that were experienced in recent times, you get something like 0.2% of gross domestic product or GDP. In the case of the Bank of Ghana, it's around 8%. So that is almost 40 times as high as what we saw in Europe. In short, there is really very little benefit in attempting to compare to other places when your losses are astronomical. When your losses are astronomical, you don't really start comparing to others. It's almost like saying that, okay, somebody complains about, the salary in a company. And then you say, but other companies also pay low salaries. Okay, how higher are their salary compared to, I say, 40 times more? That would make no sense. So that is really the way you have to look at it. Now we go into a little bit more detail and we find out that the Bank of Ghana's accounts can be broken down into four layers in terms of how these losses came about. First is the massive haircuts that they endured on bonds that they have bought a lot of government debt or they've given money to the government, and those monies they've given to the government were to be paid back. So they are considered as assets. Now, those assets, the government said that because the country is broke, they are going to cut half of it. So essentially, they're going to reduce the value of the asset by half. the loans that the Bank of Ghana had given to the government, which were assets on the book of Ghana, were to be slashed in half, and they will reprofile the rest. They also acknowledge exchange rate losses, increase in their operational expenses, and then interest expense on their monetary policy operations. It's only the last excuse that usually most of the other losses we are seeing around the world aligns with. So essentially, when interest rates go up, it costs the central banks more to also conduct monetary operations. So usually, almost all the losses that you are seeing around the world have come about because of that particular reason. The other reasons that is given is very peculiar, and I'll explain in a moment. Take exchange rate losses. The exchange rate is one of the functions of the central bank. One of the primary tasks of the central bank is currency stability. So if through the central bank's effort, of course, the central government itself has a huge role to play in terms of fiscal policy, but its monetary stability is one of the key roles of the central bank. So if through that you make losses, you can't just simply wash your hands off it. So I will not talk a lot about exchange rate losses. I'll focus primarily on the haircuts, and then I'll go into the operational expenses, which I will narrow down to the headquarters as an example of how its operational expenses are not very sound. When you decide that you're going to, go broke as a country, you're going to default on your debt, you have to take into account the fact that the central bank lends money to the government. So the central bank is a lender to the government. It's one of the creditors. Because it's one of the creditors, its assets are also going to be hit, just like we've seen with all the investors and the rest of it. That's true. But the IMF warns that when it comes to the central bank, how you manage their situation during a debt restructuring is very important. And it has to be done with care and skill. So if you carefully read the central bank's, the IMF's guidance on how you do debt restructuring, and you compare it to how we did it in the case of the Bank of Ghana, that raises a lot of problems. And because the Bank of Ghana is independent, and nothing could have been forced on it unless it had agreed, the question then arises why it accepted the approach that the government took. So let's look at case studies in other places where they've had a major debt restructuring and there's been an impact on the central bank and how they dealt with it. In the case of Greece, it was very straightforward. They said to the government that, well, these are assets and we are needed because of the fact that we have to have policy credibility. We can't just let you come in and destroy our asset base. So if you're going to do this debt restructuring and want us to play a role and help you to make your numbers look good, the IMF said bring it to 55%. You can't do it unless you slash the valuation of our assets, which is the loans we're giving to you. Then you have to give us something back. And what the Greek government then was forced to do was to transfer title of some state-owned enterprise to the central bank that helped the central bank recalibrate its balance sheet. Barbados had a different approach, which was that they built the recapitalization into the program. So the cost of the recapitalization, because you are basically destroying the balance sheet of the central bank. So you, the government, has to help to restore that balance sheet. In Ghana's case, they are saying they may do it in 5 years, but they've not budgeted for it in the program. So the way in which they've intended to bring the debt down, the percentage of the debt as a percentage of GDP down to about 55%, they have not planned for the recapitalization. So it makes no sense in the way that they've described it. If you look at the way the Greeks did it, it turns out that Greece, even when the country was collapsing, its economy was collapsing, and it had this massive debt crisis, the central bank in 2012, when that process was undertaken and the central bank took a hit, it still turned a profit, as you can see on the screen. So Greece turned a profit during the period when restructuring was happening in Greece. I would say that their situation was even worse than ours, if you look at the data. In the case of Barbados, it did turn a loss, but as I've explained, they did a number of things through recapitalization that prevented them from being the state that we are in, where our central bank risks losing credibility. Because without some of those assets, and the impact on their cash flow, it's not always clear that they have all the money that they need without printing money to do some of the things that they have to do if the economy was to go to a tailspin. So having a strong balance sheet as a central bank is an important anchor of your credibility. And the way that the Barbadians did it established that, to my mind, they paid strong attention to this policy credibility issue. Don't forget also that at the time that this was happening, director fees in Barbados, the Central Bank of Barbados directors, independent directors, that helps it run the board, was about $30,000. You know, we've had a running battle with the Bank of Ghana in recent days, because we found out that director fees is almost $800,000. They say that also includes the cost of meetings and the cost of stationery and the rest of it. But that really doesn't make much of a difference. How much is a cost of a meeting or a cost of stationery? So really, if you think of Ghana having, a country like Ghana spending almost 30 times on their board of directors compared to Barbados, it's not surprising that our losses will be worse because it appears as if the Bank of Ghana is profligate. That leads us back to the issue around why they were buying so much bonds in the first place. Because part of what they were doing was they were abetting loose fiscal policy. Instead of being independent and hitting, the government and licking the government to shape and saying, look, you can't just keep spending money you don't have. Every time these requests were coming in, they were just, complying. And that is why it's turning out that it appears they had hidden liabilities. Because you look at their own records, and they say that by the end of 2022, they had about 42 billion Ghana cedis in government securities. And then when these issues of losses started to come, so I'm taking this from the December 2022 data that we had. And just from September to January, September 2022 to January 23, when the whole restructuring exercise began, the Bank of Ghana appears to have doubled how much government debt it was carrying. So it was reporting 42 billion at the end of September 2022. By the time this happened, and now we are beginning to know that they had these huge losses because they have given the government so much money than the government itself could afford. It had jumped to 80 billion. So that's a massive jump. Accumulated debts of about 40 billion, all of a sudden 80 billion. This kind of reckless lending to the government cannot be wished away. Particularly when by the time we're through, we're then beginning to realize that the Bank of Ghana then was holding almost 30%. If you look at the numbers, because the domestic debt was about 217 billion, as we were told. If the Bank of Ghana was holding 80 billion of it, that's almost 30%. Even if it was the 50 billion or 60 billion that we've also seen in some of their numbers, the 60 billion we've seen in some of their numbers, that is almost 30%. You look at Kenya, and Kenyan Central Bank holds, in terms of its share of domestic debt, it's about 2%. So when you have a central bank that becomes basically the wallet of the government, of a profligate government, if the government is spending, just enabling that becomes problematic. Then also, in an attempt to justify why all of this has happened, the Bank of Ghana all of a sudden starts to use very misleading data in the statement that released to all of us, telling us that the Netherlands, for instance, the Dutch Central Bank experienced losses that were up to 11% of GDP. When the numbers themselves, when you look at the numbers in terms of estimated losses as a percent of GDP, you look at the GDP and you look at the losses that were occasioned in the case of the Netherlands, it does not get anywhere close to that 10%. You get my point? So you can't even trust the numbers that they are giving out, because 9 billion out of 800 something billion is just about 1%. But because they got 8% of GDP losses, they have to bump up the Dutch losses, the Dutch Central Bank's losses, to 11% to look as if their 8% is not as bad. So those kind of things I don't think a central bank should do. If the Dutch Central Bank's losses are 1% of GDP and yours is 8% of GDP, accept that your losses are 8 times that of the Dutch Central Bank, and therefore there's a problem, and try and explain it. Don't just fudge the numbers in an official statement that you release to the public, knowing that analysts like us will look at it very closely. So that was the losses on the balance sheet and their profit and loss statement. We now go into the issue of operational expenses, and I'm only talking now about the head office because we don't have time. In the case of the head office, it's very straight. You had a budget. The budget that you had for the project said 80-something billion because you had the negotiations with the Public Procurement Authority, and you accepted that was the amount that was reasonable. You are still at design stage. While you were still at design stage, the budget had gone to 220 billion. So you had already shown, even before you had started constructing, that the variation was almost 300%. In those kind of circumstances, if you use a normal predictive model for this kind of project cost overrun modeling, you conclude that by the time they are complete, because a lot of variation tends to happen in construction than in design, you are going to get like 500% cost overrun. That is the original budget versus how much it actually costs to complete the project. It's going to be like 5 times or more what the original budget was. That's not really sound project management. And also we have data in terms of, in Ghana, projects of that nature, large scale projects, what are the usual overruns? And Ghana is pretty bad. There's no doubt about it. We tend to spend way more than we budget on public projects. But even so, the average is about 75%. So if we take the 500% possibility, which is that the project is going to cost $400 million instead of the $80 million that was budgeted for, we are talking of almost 500% cost overrun versus the average in Ghana around 75%. That is massive. And this is a central bank that is supposed to manage money and therefore have extraordinary skill sets in how you manage projects and all of that. Then we come back to the issue around whether or not we should be building something that's massive anyway. This is going to be twice the size of Terminal 3. Central bank needs for offices don't dramatically expand from year to year. Why is it that you need a building that is the size of 2 times Ghana's biggest airport terminal? Then they say, oh, well, but the average cost is $2,000 per square meter. And $2,000 per square meter is below the average for Ghana for prestige high-rise projects. Essentially, skyscrapers, big, tall buildings in Ghana, on average cost about $2,700 square meters. So if we are doing $2,000 per square meter, that is not too bad. Well, it depends on which intelligence database you use. We are using the African Construction and Property Cost Guide. You can look at an actual and that is managed primarily by academics. It's the University of Stellenbosch. You can look at data from actual consultants like RLB, and you find out that RLB data shows that in Ghana, actually, the cost about $1,400. So they look for the source that has a higher amount, and they use that source to justify it. But even let's accept that source. This is the source that they are using, the African Property and Construction Cost Guide source. And let's take the $2,700. Even so, it's still misleading because what they've done is that they've taken the line item for prestige high-rise offices, which is $2,720, and then pretend as if the entire project is the office tower. So if you map it, then you say, okay, it's true. But when you look at the actual breakdown of the project, the high-rise tower, the prestige high-rise tower, is about 40% of the gross project, right? Because you have other elements of that project. So when you look at it, what's the actual percentage of the high-rise, you get to about 40%. And if you do a weighted average, you get to about $1,600, which is significantly lower than what it is budgeted for this building. But that's not what worries most people. What worries most people is the procurement abuse. The fact that they decided, even though this was such an expensive project, not to use competitive tendering, open it up, let people come and bid all across the country, and then look for the best pricing. They decided that no, they were going to select a number of companies and then choose one. That is not sensible, in my view, given the scale of the project. They say, oh no, because we did that because of national security. And national security means we can't open it to everybody to come and bid. But you can open it to a lot of people to come and bid and then use your national security lenses. We don't believe in national security excuse because of simple things like the fact that they have a lot of other issues in procurement where they prefer single sourcing and restricted tendering than competitive tendering as a standard behavior. So you look at their complexes that they are building, the guest house complexes in Takoradi and Tamale. And what you find is that there was a company that had been awarded the project, Maripoma. They come in and they hunt Maripoma out and bring in the sea money through really shady circumstances that leads to Maripoma taking them to the tribunal. And the fact of the matter is that they tried to suggest that Maripoma got some loans from some of the banks that had collapsed in ways that really suggested that Mr. Ali Seidu was being hounded because of the fact that they wanted to take the project from Maripoma and give it to the Simoni. And they've done that for both of the major guest houses, which cost millions and millions of dollars. And we know there have been cost variations from the original spending. So, that or national security, what is it that Maripoma had in the Bank of Ghana regime that before they existed, which was national security compliant, that when you come in, it's no longer national security compliant and only the Simoni can match? Think of the cars they buy, which they buy from the likes of Auto Dream and Gemotech. They've spent millions of dollars buying Toyota vehicles, Mercedes-Benz, and things like that from these companies. Gemotech alone, from the last couple of years, millions of dollars. Not all of it single sourcing and restricted tendering. What is national security about a Toyota or a Mercedes-Benz? Why must you use restricted tendering and single sourcing to buy Toyota vehicles and Mercedes-Benzes? How do you justify that Gemotech has some national security clearance that requires you to buy the cars from them in that fashion? So it tells you that it's not about national security, it's about their natural practice. When we look at the data in terms of procurement, the central bank in recent years, you find out that over 90% of general routine procurement is happening through restricted tender and single source. Even when they are buying a forklift to go and lift the currency that they move across the country, they use single source. And don't think it's always been like this. There's an advert from 2010 where the Bank of Ghana is publishing in the national dailies its procurement plan and inviting people to bid all over the place. The argument is that it's just the nature of their procurement practice. It's a culture there that is currently seriously hampering their cost efficiency, and it's got nothing whatsoever to do with national security. Because it can't be that national security is the reason for all of this single sourcing and restricted tendering. That's just the way you behave. So it's not surprising that for this building, you use the same approach as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bright Simmons. And a couple of questions that we would like to have Bright Simmons respond to, but so that I'm able to share the time a bit equitably to my guests, let me have John Jinapor also make his, if you like, presentation. As far as the Bank of Ghana, 60.8 billion lost Ghana cedis and $250 million headquarters building programs are concerned, and the explanations that Dr. Ernest Addison has given. For example, Bryce Simmons doesn't feel that they need, a headquarters of the structure and design. But the Bank of Ghana is telling you that Ghana is hosting after, Secretariat, and they are looking forward. They are being, they are envisioning that Ghana may as well be able to host, the central bank for the sub-region when that also takes off. So they are doing something and having such anticipations. What's wrong with doing that? All right, of course, there is a mention of the fact that if this were to be considered today, they would not have made this a priority. But when you check the timelines, he says it started in 2019. When you check the timelines, you can fault that claim as well, because when the project actually began, we had gotten into difficulty. Yes, John, the governor and his deputies, according to your ultimatum, they have some 3 days within which to announce their resignation, or they are going to face a series of actions, starting with the demonstration on the 5th of September. Why so?
Thank you. Let me thank Bright. I think Bright has done a lot of the technical stuff. So I'll try and limit myself and not be repetitive.
Good.
We're talking of 60.8 billion losses. Mm-hmm. Like Bright said, if you look at that amount and compare that to the size of Ghana's economy, that's a huge amount. Indeed, we anticipate that we would need 1 billion every year for 3 years in order to resolve our problems. That's what the minister tells us. And yet, in 1 year, we are losing close to $6 billion. I mean, that's mind-boggling. It's a very serious issue.
It's a technical loss, and you understand what that means.
Yes, and I ask myself, what is technical loss? What does that mean? I mean, you can't just throw words and leave it there. Yes, the Bank of Ghana cannot be said to be insolvent, but the Bank of Ghana has the power to issue fiat money. Fiat money is simply putting currency out that is not backed by any commodity value. You had what you call commodity money, then you move to fiat money. So Bank of Ghana is the sole body that can decide to release currency or engage in what you call
money print supply. Money.
Now, money, by its definition, first of all, is a medium of exchange. So I need a laptop, you need maybe a bag of maize, it has value. So the Bank of Ghana's main job is to put the exact amount of paper money that meets that value. If it puts in more than it meets that value, it leads to inflation. Because apart from the medium of exchange, the other one is what you call a store of value. So if I decide I don't want to keep my maize, I want to keep 10 cedi, my anticipation is that in 1 month time, when I go to the market with the 10 cedi, I should be able to get that bag of maize. If the Bank of Ghana puts more than necessary, what effectively it does is that it reduces my purchasing power. So what the Bank of Ghana did It doesn't affect the Bank of Ghana directly. It affects the ordinary Ghanaian. In that the Bank of Ghana is putting so much money in the economy and is leading to hyperinflation. That is why inflation hit around 50%. So what the Bank of Ghana technically did, and to put it in simple terms without engaging in the finance terms, is that it took your money. That's all. Look, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you explain it, the Bank of Ghana effectively aided government by taking your money, not in the form of taxes, but in the form of putting so much money in the economy, such that it leads to what you call hyperinflation.
That's why 100,000 Ghana cedis today in US dollars is not up to $10,000.
That is it.
Like 8,000 something.
Yes. Because on the foreign side, that's a foreign exchange.
A whopping 100,000 Ghana cedis.
That is it. That's why I don't even want us to
10,000 euros.
Yeah, because a lot of the viewers are not interested in the technical issues. What they ask is, what is the implication for me? And you see, foreign exchange is simply buying dollars. But we use the price quotation, others use the volume. The price quotation simply means that if I need something that is sold for $1, and you go and import it, say, from US, hitherto, maybe 10 cedis could give me that. With what the Bank of Ghana has done, I would require like 20 cedi. Because the exchange rate moved nominally from 6 cedi to about 12 cedi. Meanwhile, your salary is the same. So if you could purchase one bag of rice, imported Thai rice or whatever, one bag, today you can only purchase half a bag. So when we get worried, we are not getting worried because some people say, oh, Bank of Ghana is bankrupt. Yes, it's a technical word. But the point is that it's affecting the ordinary Ghanaian. And I thought that the Bank of Ghana should have exercised some level of discretion. Samson, go to the budget itself. And just, you see, I always want to refer to the source document so that I'm clear as to what I'm doing. I beg you, just one second.
And Bright, when John is done, we have heard from Martin and our other guests, we will have you respond to just a couple of questions.
Okay, so I refer to Table 3, page 35, paragraph 186 of the 2023 Media Fiscal Policy Review. Now, in every economy, you have the monetary side and the fiscal side. The two work in tandem to achieve your overall objective. In order to attain the fiscal side, government would normally depend on taxes. Depending on the amount you have, then you do what you call a budget. So you do your projected expenditure vis-a-vis your projected revenue. In 2022, government projected that it would achieve total revenue of 96 billion. At the end of the year, government got 98 billion. So revenue mobilization was not the problem. Government met its revenue target. So this idea that, oh, there was a problem, we didn't get the money, it's not true. Government overperformed in terms of its revenue target. It's here, 96 billion. Media review. Projected out at 98 billion. So where from this issue? Now, having gotten the revenue, you have to match your revenues with your expenditure. Because if at the end of the month, your salary is 5,000, you cut your quote according to that revenue. Now look at the expenditure. The expenditure, government projected that it will spend 133 billion. By the end of the year, it has spent 165 billion. That is where the problem is. Fiscal indiscipline, 33 billion over and above its expenditure target. Which country does that? Which country does that? 33 billion? That is about 3 billion in 1 year. That's what government spent in 1 year, 3 billion. And they won't allow us, and they're using all kinds of technical jargons here and there. You see, the central bank is a lender of a last resort. The central bank regulates the other banks. The central bank also advises government. So when government is going on a trajectory that will result in serious difficulty, the central bank owes it a duty to advise government. And we have passed the law to say that you cannot go beyond 5% of previous year's revenue. However, when you go beyond that, immediately notify Parliament. And I'm sure Martin would deal with that, but I just thought, immediately notify Parliament. Did the governor do that in accordance with law? Because it's easy to determine that amount. This one, you don't need to gather data. You know that last year's revenue was 100 billion. 5% will be 5 billion. So as you keep advancing, you keep record. Once you cross that threshold of 5 billion, that means you've crossed that. Inform Parliament. Did the governor do that? And then the minister comes to say, I require X amount of money. I mean, you see, normally, every central bank would support government up to a certain level. But not what we are witnessing. I mean, this doesn't make sense at all. And I'm surprised. I've read a lot about Governor Addison. I'm surprised that he allowed himself to be pushed to that limit. But some say, we raised issues with this in 2021. In fact, in the 2022 media review budget, we held a press conference and said the central bank was printing money. The central bank denied it. They denied it. Then in September, we insisted. And they said, no, it's not a loan. It's an overdraft. An overdraft is a short-term debt instrument. So maybe you're having a small challenge. I'll give you some money. I expect that within 1 year, you pay back. When the year ended, they immediately converted it to bonds. From overdrafts, it now moved from overdraft to bonds, which then becomes a long-term debt instrument. So you have to be servicing interest. Now something happened. Go and read the DDE that the minister presented to Parliament. They were in 3 categories: government bonds, Dachi, ESLA, and the 4th one may be Cocoa Bond. Bank of Ghana never surfaced there. Check it. Bank of Ghana was not part of it. So you know,
the governor says there was zero financing to government in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2021. It says that the bank provided financing to government only in the pandemic year of 2020 and the crisis year of 2022.
We had a meeting with them. We disagreed with them. All they did is that they rolled over some of the payments. It depends on how you want to capture it. You can engage in creative accounting. You can engage in creative accounting and decide that I'll push it and capture it in 2022. That's what he did. You see, and what pains me is a level of, excuse my language, dishonesty that I'm seeing. That people think that they can use technicalities to just dribble all of us. I mean, that's what worries me. If they were frank, honest, and say, look, yes, this is what we've done. Maybe we believe that we should have done that. And that maybe going forward, we have to learn some lessons. We could somehow live with that. But this attempt to dribble us and to use jargons and technicalities and say it's just technical loss. As it stands, the equity, and like Frank, it was said 55 billion. Your equity is what shareholders bring. So at the end of the year, if you make profit, you either pay dividend or you transfer it, and then it increases your equity. You keep that equity because anything can happen. So anytime there's a loss, you fall on the equity. Now with this 55 billion, how do you deal with it? It's a critical issue. The governor said 5 years. The government will have to recapitalize. If you read the IMF document, nowhere is this mentioned in our agreement with the IMF. So even that one, they are not being honest with us in respect of how you deal with it. But even more importantly, is that if you read this budget, the government projected that they would engage in zero borrowing domestically. It's here. Appendix 3A, page 113, domestic, exceptional financing, zero. You know what government projects to borrow this year? By June, they had failed to achieve that target. And now government says it will borrow 46 billion from the domestic market. From zero to 46 billion. Look, we are heading for trouble. I'm very, very worried, looking even into the future, not the past. And we ought to be very measured and very careful.
You're saying
Government-
suggestions that the worst is over is not accurate.
That cannot be true. Inflation is going up. Interest rates are going up. This is a government that pumps so much money into the economy and then turn around and tell us, oh, the economy is heating, so we are jacking up interest rates. When you are the cause of the problem, the governor, the Bank of Ghana is the cause of the problem because they are printing so much money in the system. The economy is heating up, and then they turn around and increase the interest rate to mop up that excess liquidity.
The governor says that what they did, they acted in good faith for the broader interest of Ghana.
The key
He points you to Sri Lanka. And you have mentioned Greece and told you what happened, that because of the buffer that they offered, we survived it.
He's gotten it completely wrong, in my opinion. I respect him, but he's completely wrong. Look, the World Bank document says that 850 people have been pushed into the poverty bracket. It's a serious thing. Almost 1 million Ghanaians have been pushed into the poverty bracket because cost of living is gone up. Look, what the governor should have done. And every rational being, if you talk to all the experts, they would agree with you. He should have looked in the face of Ken Ofori-Atta and tell him that, look, I cannot give you this amount. And that maybe I can meet you halfway. Go and cut back on your expenditure or stick to the budget expenditure of 133 billion. If Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta and this government has stuck to their budgeted expenditure of 133 billion, we wouldn't be in this mess. And look, I'm very worried. To be frank with you, when I look at the data and where we are headed, I'm very worried. We are borrowing at over 30%. You know what it means? If you borrow 1 billion in the first quarter, in the next quarter, government will have to borrow 130 billion. In the preceding quarter, you have to borrow 130 billion again and 30% on the 130 billion. We are borrowing our way into a ditch again. Even with the restructured debt, I have good information from the ministry that they were struggling to pay. Not the old bonds, though, the restructured ones. And I think that, look, this country belongs to all of us. It doesn't belong to only one person. Let's call a spade a spade. If these exceptional financing were good, why did the Bank of Ghana insist that in the IMF program, there should be zero financing? That's what we've done. We've now agreed that there's zero financing. But something, I beg you, I'm not trying to go back because we are all learning. All these things that are coming up, are they new? No, these things, are they new? That Sinohydro, we told you, look, it's a national debt. Provision for it. This government said, no way, they won't agree. Dachi bonds, we told you, look, Dachi, their balance sheet, they have no money. Provision for it. They said no. Tesla bonds, provision for it. They said no. You know why we are doing this haircut? Because the IMF insisted that provision for all of them. And when they captured all that, our debt to GDP suddenly ballooned. So they had no option than to tell Bank of Ghana that we can't pay you. You see, we are all learning. Let us learn to do the right thing. If we had provision for all these things, yes, the pandemic will hit you. Yes, you will have difficult moments. But it wouldn't be as steep and as difficult as we are witnessing. They gave an example of Bank of England, that they made losses. Go and check why they made losses. They did not make losses because they advanced money to government. It's because of quantitative easing. They bought bonds during those difficult moments. Interest rates were so low, and you know the price of a bond is inversely related to interest rate.
Bank of Ghana did the same.
No.
Bought COVID bonds.
No, not that. We are talking of printing money. If you bought bonds, it's backed by some value. I'm talking of printing
But
money.
in 2022, they didn't print money.
They did. If they did not, we wouldn't observe this level of inflation. Look, this level of inflation is simply demand pull inflation.
So you're refusing to accept his explanations.
So where did they get the money? Because the Bank of Ghana doesn't keep that amount of money. The Bank of Ghana simply keeps reserves from the banks.
In the broader picture,
So where did they get that money?
Dr. Addison says, look at this as a reflection of the total cost of the economic and social crisis the country faced over the years in an attempt to resolve a major structural problem of the Ghanaian economy? This is what they are trying to do.
You know, I'm laughing my head off and asking that. So this is the solution to deal with the structural problem of Ghana. Let's agree that Ghana has a structural problem. And Dr. Addison thinks that the best way to resolve that structural problem is to give this amount of money to government in 1 year and write it off the next year. I mean, who does this? Let's even forget about the politics. If Ghana were his company, a financial institution, and he had a client, would he advance that amount of money to that company, knowing very well the government cannot pay? Because they knew that, look, we're heading for this trouble. Every objective person who saw the trajectory, our debt to GDP, vis-a-vis the interest payment component and our revenues, would know that we're heading for trouble. He should stop those things, eat the humble pie, take a sober reflection, and let's ensure that never again would we chart this path. Because this issue and this very problem has far-reaching implications for this country.
Let's hear from Kabiru Mahama. Thank you very much for also joining us. From where you sit, also being someone who has the privilege of advising on economic matters at the highest of the realm, what do you say? Are the reasons and explanations given by the Dr. Addison sound enough?
Thank you very much, and let me say good morning to you, Lawyer Sampson, and good morning to my colleague panelists in the studio and those also joining by Zoom. I'm speaking from the field, and I'm actually currently in Naleru, where the Super Delegates Conference is taking place. So there may be some noise at the background, and I'll just hope that your production will pardon me if the noise is getting a bit loud, but I'll try to minimize the background noise.
A while ago, we saw the president casting his vote and leaving the election grounds. We expect that the same situation will be happening across the country smoothly, so that at the end of the day, there will not be any reports of violence or any untoward thing.
Yeah, that is our hope and expectation too, because I'm not sure any of the candidates will tend to profit from any violence. And we are doing whatever it takes to make sure that we have the process go on peaceably, and at the end, the winner will be able to build bridges and to carry the rest of the team along. So currently, it's ongoing smoothly. There have been few skirmishes, but of course, election people always want to raise issue, especially when they feel like things are not in the way that they are expecting. Right. So that be the key. It's going on well. So now let's go back to the main issue. Council, the major issue in contention is the Central Bank of Ghana. And the Central Bank is not just like any institution. It's an institution that was set up in accordance with the Constitution and the relevant statute, Act 612, establishing it. Now, to measure whether or not the central bank and the leadership of central bank has done anything untoward, we need to go back to the source document to ask, what is the mandate of the bank? Have they done anything that is in contravention of that particular mandate? And if they do, then we have very good justification why we should call for their heads. But if we look at those particular factors genuinely and without recourse to any, if you like, frivolities, and we come to the determination that they are not culpable, why do we have to ask for their head? Now, the object establishing it, if you go to section 3 of the Bank of Ghana Act, it clearly gives us the mandate of the bank. One, to ensure that we have price stability. As amended, the framers of the statute also added relevant provisions like promoting government economic policy and supporting government economic program, and as well ensuring financial stability. These are the three main objects of the bank. And if you read it together with section 6, you look at their functions. Nowhere in the function of the central bank is the posting or profit and loss report, and the outcome of this report has been a measure of the central bank performance. Profit loss reports are only icing on the cake. We need to establish that. And we have never, in this history, in this republic, be concerned about whether or not our central bank is making profit or making losses. But understandably so, if you have a fiscal year or you have a financial year that the central bank is posting some loss of 60 billion, it will invoke the sense, there are every right thinking Ghana will be concerned. What has happened so dramatic that the central bank is posting such loss? Of course, historically, the central bank has given us a report of what they have been doing. In 2016, we have some impairments. In 2015, there were some loans advanced to some, in the event of bank recapitalization. These loans were written off, okay, because we realized that these were money that you cannot get back from the banks that were actually dissolved, okay? So on the back of that, we had some first loss experience in 2017 when they reported in their books. That did not stop the central bank from operating. The central bank was policy relevant. The central bank supported a government economic policy. We were able to experience 7% average growth in the economy. The currency was brought much more stable. And in 2019, the central bank reported profit of 1.6 billion. In 2020, they reported profit of another 1.5 billion. 2021, another profit of 1.3 billion or so. Now, so you will ask, what has happened that over the last 5 years, 3 years before 2022, the central bank was making profit. All of a sudden, they have huge debt recorded. We need to be sober and reflect. Is it the case that something might have happened that genuinely we cannot blame the central bank leadership, that genuinely we cannot blame the government at large, but we can soberly reflect on them and ascribe the relevant reasons? I'm not one trying to make excuses for central bank or even government at large. When government is at fault, we would want to take the blame. Nonetheless, if you look at the laws as presented by the central bank, on the back, in fact, legacy debt, government legacy debt, as the central governor, bank governor has mentioned, from 1992 all the way to 2022, government over time has been owing central bank, okay, and this obligation of central bank to obligation of central government to central bank is a legacy issue. Now, in 2020, when we were hit by COVID, government had to issue the COVID-19 bond and other non-marketable instruments, and this was about 10 billion that was advanced to the central bank. Again, cocoa board advances to the cocoa board loans or cocoa loans have been part of the central bank debt. All these have been part and parcel of the routine operation of the central bank. Now, what would make a central bank forfeit such a huge amount of money to the republic if it is not done on good faith? My brother in the studio mentioned that like central bank will give money 1 year and the following year will write it off. That is not the case of the central bank. At least we know that there was zero financing of the central government by central bank between 2019, 2020, and even 2021. There was zero financing as presented in the report. So a year that you have central bank coming in means that there was something significant that might have happened. Now, when we're doing the IMF program, I have been parcel of meetings, and I've actually also listened to my senior brother, Bryce Simmons, giving the suggestion that it's like whenever government comes to central bank, they give the money to them without hesitation. I have listened to argument made by central bank governor about policy credibility. How government financing, central bank finance of government activity is actually reaching the banks. But you have two devils. Either to collapse your economy and preserve your central bank, which is part and parcel of the economy, or to salvage the economy and save the central bank at large. This was the decision the governor of the central bank was faced with. As a result, the central bank took a decision to support with overdraft. Whenever government auction failures or there were any time we have auction failure, central bank will step in with overdraft. And this overdraft was used to finance, in fact, our everyday activity. Government needed to pay workers. Government needed to, in fact, continue the fight against COVID-19. Government had other statutory deductions that you need to transmit money by way of statutory funds, all this needed to go on, Samson. And if we have all these things going on, we would expect that whenever government revenue does not meet the expenditure, you can't say because government has not gotten the expenditure for the month, salaries should not be paid. It would be very, very unfortunate for a central government to wake up one day and tell workers that because for this month, my money or revenue I was expecting to get is not equivalent to my expenditure, so therefore I'm postponing your salary. I mean, such a government will not be tolerated by the people. I mean, we'll have the situation we had in Sri Lanka, where virtually we have the masses on the streets going into the presidency to siege the house of the president or the residence of the president. We don't have to get such a situation in Ghana. So because of this situation, the central bank always and all the time was stepping in. But one thing about overdraft we need to understand is that the BOG Act has actually made provision for overdraft. And it has actually also made provision that whenever there's any delay in the payment or government repayment of overdraft, the central bank could convert it to by way of treasury bill to government. Okay, these are part, and it's not even in this current government. Okay, previous government, even my brother's government, Mr. Jinapo's government, central bank has been supporting central government by way of overdraft. In fact, central bank operation does not include construction of hotels or guest house. Under their leadership, they constructed guest house for, central bank constructed a guest house in Takoradi because they felt that at that time, they needed to diversify and do something that would bring in more money to the center. But you know, the core mandate of the central bank does not include any of these things.
At least we know the core mandate. First, primary, is to achieve price stabilization or stability. This regime has failed in that regard.
Sometimes I disagree totally with the fact that this regime has failed in price stability, because you would ask yourself, why do you say there is no price stability? The basic measure of price stability you probably refer to inflation, right?
Exactly.
You would ask yourself, but for the measure the central bank has taken, what would have happened to our currency? What would have happened to prices of goods and services? And even that, the availability of goods and services for the Ghanaian people to purchase. We have other places where, apart from prices being so high, people are not able to get the product to buy. So if you put all these things together and you still hold the view that central government or the central bank has failed in its core mandate of promoting price stability, it is to get the picture wrong. In any case, if even we are coming with that particular argument, it is genuine because that is their key mandate, and we can argue on that. But to go over issues of profit and loss, to use that as the basis to say that the central bank the governor should go, I think it's quite unfortunate. Okay. There were some discussion and comparison made about different countries. Look, the central bank is not doing this comparison to suggest that it is okay for us to make losses. Okay? The extent of that particular comparison is to show that, look, you shouldn't be like the lender of last resort is also broke. A picture should not be created that central bank is, because you have the opportunity of creating money, or you can issue what they call fiat money, there's no possibility where you should go broke. They have given instances of where even advanced economies faced with such a difficulty we have had to report losses at the end of their financial year.
All right.
That is the extent of that particular comparison, but not to justify. People are saying that our situation is quite high when you compare it to our GDP. Truth be told, it is high. But the question is that, is our situation peculiar or not? It is. Because our debt stock, including contingent liability, is not as same as the other countries. Our haircut, in fact, I was part of the consultation when the advisors were asking us to have some London zone of 55% of debt to GDP by 2028. Of the instruments that were put on the table for discussion, we wouldn't have even the London zone, wouldn't have met the London zone by 2028 if we had considered only the instruments on the table. So now, what do? You look at even government its own self. That the central bank is part of the general government. If you look at it broadly, what can the central bank do to forfeit by way of helping government to have the London zone?
All right, thank you.
That was where the central bank was presented with a proposal.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. See, sometimes we moderate these shows, and it's an ethical requirement on us to show a certain professionalism. But you see, when I speak to people and I get to hear about their pain,
excellent.
People who have suffered the haircut, people whose life savings have been reduced to nothing. This talk doesn't mean anything to them.
Actually aggravates it. It's like a slap in the face. It's adding insult to injury.
Having listened to Governor Addison, and you have been very, considerate. You have said that you appreciate the 250, million headquarters building because they have shown that it's cheaper and so on. So that one, you don't have any issues with them. Having listened to him, do you think that the step that the minority intends to take is useful?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, look, the minority had slept for too long. Yes, because the whole of last year, apart from the Arise Ghana demonstration and the MI demonstration, the minority didn't do much. It was so painful. They looked like they had no balls. If now they are getting up, it's a bit, half a loaf is better than none. Yes.
You forgot about the Citizen Coalition.
Citizen Coalition, went to the Auditor General, and pushed and also got some disintraction there. We hope that the Auditor General will live to the billing. Good, yes. So what the minority is doing is what we have to do as citizens. Because look, Governor Addison has lost the plot. Now, he's very, very incompetent. Addison's problem is like the way Wampa was under their regime. Addison and Wampa will belong to one basket. Let me show you why this is something. As I've said, the building I support. Let's go into the mandate of this central bank. Price stabilization. Last year, at the end of last year, the inflation was at 54.1%. Hunger. So once inflation is gone through the roof, you've lost the plot. This year, the last 3 months, you see 42%, 43%. It's still not better. Even July, where we thought that, maybe some of the foodstuffs had started coming in, it should be better. It went up slightly, didn't it? So the point is that, and if you look, if you look at what Dr. Atia Kabri is saying, it's laughable, very, very laughable that he's doing that. The reason is something. Look at the mandate of the central bank. Look, under Section 32 of Act 612, the Central Bank Act, it says that the central bank is advisor to government on fiscal matters. The central bank is advisor to government on fiscal matters. Let's read briefly. The bank shall advise government on the monetary transactions of the government and government agencies, right? And then the international and local contracts to which the government is a party and which relate to the object and functions of the bank. Come to the Constitution, Article 183, the functions of the central bank. 183, clause 2. I'm interested in C. It says, encourage and promote economic development and the efficient utilization of the resources of Ghana through effective and efficient operation of a banking and credit system in Ghana, and do all other things, blah, blah, blah. So you look at it. Encourage and promote economic development through efficient utilization of the resources of Ghana through effective
and efficient operation of a banking and credit system.
This is the same central bank that took away licenses and did what? That operation, the collapse of the banks. Later, it turned out that with about 9 billion or so, or less, we could have sustained these banks. In America, you hear too big to fail. When the crisis happened there in 2008, Bears and Stein, my favorite, what do you call it? The investment banks. What did they do? Merrill Lynch. Yes, Merrill Lynch. I mean, when I was younger, I was hoping someday to work for Merrill Lynch. I mean, somehow, that kind of thing. They were all in trouble. They were saved. You came because of apparently political vindictiveness. You took licenses away. You took licenses away and caused big trouble. Today, the unemployment coming from the collapse of those banks, we are yet to finish counting. So you see that it had been a long time coming, that Addison is just not up to scratch. You were pulling licenses away when you could have sustained it. You could have sustained it. So if you look at it, please, advisor to government on fiscal matters. So the very fiscal matters. So this is a simple thing, something, breaking it down. Governor Addison should have seen that, look, we brought Akufo-Addo in to move from what? Taxation to production. So by the end of the first year, when Governor Addison didn't see rice farms producing perfumed rice that were importing, he should have known there will be trouble someday. At the end of the first year, when he didn't see a revitalization of the poultry farms so that we're not going to be importing so much poultry, he should have known that there will be trouble.
They'll rather collapse it.
Excellent. At the end of the year, as he saw imports going, and you know under Article 184, he's supposed to be reporting to Parliament on this. He doesn't do. Honorable Adongo says that they invite him, he runs away. Honorable, when was the last time Addison came?
He rose and had serious issues with God. He thought, his mind was that monetary independence meant he was a bit insulated from Parliament.
Can you imagine?
Well, we made it clear to him that award of contracts and all those things are not monetary policy.
Yes.
You ought to, but he seemed to appreciate our point.
So he has to go often. You compare to the US, Powell goes, the lawyer investment banker. Powell goes to Congress. He takes decisions, even Republicans. You know, they are even more divisive than we are, the Republicans and Democrats. Ours is a joke. They are more divisive, but you see them applauding. After COVID, the initiatives that Jerome Powell took, he got an applause from Congress. That, yes, that was it. You remember he was fighting with Trump. When Powell was fighting with Trump, Addison was busy agreeing with Akufo-Addo, an incompetent president. Then you know there'll be trouble. So in one sentence, as long as the structure of the economy was not changing, that structure that President Akufo-Addo said he would change within 18 months, it should have been clear to Governor Addison that this day would come. Because if you look, why have we been to the IMF on 17 occasions? Why have we been on 17 occasions? Because the structure wasn't changing. And Akufo-Addo came on the back of coming to change from what? Taxation to production, nuisance taxes. We were hailing him in 2016. So look, Governor Addison has lost the plot. It means that, look, we pay so much for his foresight. But it turns out he has no foresight. That's why he has to step aside. You know, in law, it's not hindsight that we use. We use the foresight of a reasonable man. And you see that that's why we pay him. He couldn't see something. Look, let's repeat. As long as he didn't see local production of rice, oil, all those things that cause those problems for us every 3-4 years, he should have known that this day was coming. So, look, you know, one of the most laughable stories to read in the past 2 weeks is when you hear journalists write, and even Dr. Tia has repeated it, if the central bank hadn't paid, the economy would have collapsed. As if the central bank was insulated. When Section 32 is saying that he is the advisor to what? Government on fiscal matters. What did he do? And why didn't he leak it? That's why I say you keep comparing. You go to Jerome Powell and you see that this is a different thing. He was fighting Trump. Trump said, Powell is insane. Why is he allowing asset prices to go up, etc.? You know, but eventually, Powell's too tall. Of course, I'm not saying he doesn't have problems in the US. They have theirs. But we should know that the difference is that government has a lot of support system for the poor. But there is almost none. Look at the 2023 budget. When we're supposed to increase LIP beneficiaries for about 3.5 million citizens. What happened? In the media review, Oforiatta says 2024. Meanwhile, we are running V8s in Accra. Doesn't it occur to President Akufo-Addo that these V8s that they've bought, you remember when he came moratorium? Now he's bought more. It doesn't occur to them. Then they must stop all the V8s, all the travels, cut them down, and feed the poor. So Governor Addison is a co-architect of our current economic hardship. He must take the fall.
You don't seem to consider the exogenous, shocks that the economy has suffered as a, result of the COVID and, as we say, Ukraine.
No, Sam. When you read a bit of economics, look, my first degree, I read banking and finance. So it's in the books. Look, it's cyclical. Economics, it's cyclical. Every 3-4 years, you have one problem or another. Ghana's economic history. It's either cocoa prices have dipped or gold has dipped, etc. So we've been used to this. I don't want to hear anything like, oh, COVID is in a bigger scale. No. Listen, when President Akufo-Addo came, he said that he was coming to change the Gaggisberg economy within 18 months, 1.5 years, 18 months. By the time COVID hit, we had double. And then let's not forget, by the end of 2019, the IMF World Bank report said that we were highly debt distressed. And we went and embraced it. What's Governor Addison saying? Sam, let's not even forget. The beginning of it, one thing he did in his speech that one of the answers he was answering, was there an interview? I was shocked. I said, no, he will confuse secondary school students. When we say money printing, please, that is a term that has various meanings. It's not one. It can mean the actual printing of banknotes. It can also mean quantitative easing when government buys and so puts in more money. And then also you have the situation where apart from government also doing the buying the bonds, there are other ways you go about it when you lend, right? So it increases the supply of money. So when you said that, oh, they are not doing money printing, then you ask that, so they're lending to government, what is it? It's also money printing. Maybe you can say in this particular instance, we didn't do fiscal printing because fiscal printing of banknotes is just one meaning of money printing, but there are other forms. He said, we lend. So I said, you confuse secondary school students. No, because I know money printing and the rest. It's part of secondary school economics. Part of secondary school economics. So Governor Addison just can't. It's just like, as I said, for the building, may I repeat that, let's go slow on it. Let's ask more questions because the building is cheaper than even what Stanchart, EcoBank, the World Bank, all those buildings in that vicinity. Per unit cost, this one is cheaper than them. So although Bright is saying...
The approved amount for the building in their books, 121.8 million US dollars. But the actual cost, by way of the,
price variations
and the square meter cost, brings us to the 250 million US dollars. And he says at the time in 2019, they would not have taken this decision or made it a priority. But the facts show otherwise. By the 31st of August 2020, when the PPA approval was given, where were we? Where was the economy? Where were the signs not obvious what was coming upon us? Was the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, not writing in the Wall Street? He was writing all over the place and warning African countries about what was going to happen?
No, you see, yes, so that particular statement, I think, that's why I say it's incompetent. I don't really get it. Because in COVID, didn't we continue building roads? Didn't we continue building hospitals, etc.? Right? Yes, so that one doesn't quite add up. And don't forget, by then they had signed contracts. We all know we don't like judgment debts, etc. So when he said that one, really, I find it difficult to go with him on it. Yeah? Maybe he can talk about from the 121 to the 222 million. That one, yes. But if it's the whole project there, I don't support him when he says with hindsight they wouldn't have done it. Did COVID mean that we're not building more roads, we're not building hospitals, we're not building schools? No. So it ties in that really, it looks like he's a bit, he's lost the plot.
How useful is the demonstration that the minority and the Arise Ghana mobilizing people to do on the 5th of September if they don't resign? It's obvious there's no, intention to resign because he says, look, actually cut us some slack but for what we did, this is what your economy would have gone into. What is the use of it?
Oh, very, very, very useful. Very useful. You know what? That reminds me, even when the colonial government, our people could demonstrate that the governor of Ghana, not the central bank, be removed. And then there would even be a counter demonstration. I think Alan Barnes, whilst there was one demonstration going on, is in Accra that he be removed, then another in Kumasi that we should stay. There's something about history. The point I want to emphasize is that two demonstrations, one saying that the governor be removed, the other one saying that, he should be retained. So it tells you our history. In a democracy, if people don't get up and do this, hey, the executive will take us for granted. Because everything was very obvious that Ofori-Atta is incompetent. He was just basically making money for Akufo-Addo and the rest of their family. And yet Addison just went along, served as a piggy bank. Look at it. They say be the advisor on fiscal matters. He should produce the advice he gave government. You see, that's what Governor Addison should have done. But now they should have leaked it. You see, the last time I showed, whilst we were away on vacation, I showed Evans a book, Condoleezza Rice, the National Security Advisor. He shows that in the US, the State Department, that's their foreign ministry. You come there, begin to do things that are inimical to the state. They just leak. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, etc. They will leak it to them. Then the citizens will fight. You remember Honorable Nko last year, when they got wind that the central bank had given 22 billion or so. They made noise. Hey, Addison Ekwode came and denied. Hey, no. You see, at the end of the day, it came out. It came out. So as for the demo, it's the right thing to do. Maybe Addison will capitulate, or Akufo-Addo himself will capitulate. That's the right thing to do.
Okay, interesting there. I have just one question for Bright Simmons because of our time, so that we can end the discussion on this subject here and have time to deal with the GENSA GMPC matter, as well as the limited voter registration that minority parties, in fact, almost all the parties are added them, that the EC's posture is not one that is tenable. And talking about demonstrations, tomorrow on my show on the law, I'll be hosting Oliver Bakavomo. We'll be discussing the constitutional right to demonstrate, the do's and don'ts. Fix the Country is the only group I have heard about in this country where they were organizing a demonstration and they produce rules. What you should do, what you can't do, what you can bring, what you cannot bring. But is it not curious that suddenly the police are directing all demonstrators to the Independence Square? Is that not a fetter on the right?
Say that again, Sam. And so this particular demo, look, the police must give demonstrators the right to go to the Bank of Ghana. They should create a buffer, maybe 100 meters from the bank or 50 meters. But it can be done. In 2014, when Occupy Ghana went to Flagstaff, what happened? Great security. So that Independence Square thing must stop. So it's good we are going to interview Oliver. You see, now it's rising.
But Occupy Flagstaff House, they breached the security arrangements to go to the to the Jubilee House.
All right, yes.
They breached it.
Yeah, I won't encourage that. But bottom line is that when they went, what happened?
It led to some arrests where Kofi Bentil and the rest said, okay, if you're arresting some of us, we will all get in. Yes. So they forced themselves into the van.
Excellent.
And
yes, we must rise. We must rise. Akufo-Addo is
I will beg 1 minute of you.
Yeah, do it before I go to Bright Simmons.
On this headquarters. You didn't comment on it. You see, as at 17th January 2023, the Bank of Ghana had applied for a variation of the price of the building from the 121 to 222 million. So this issue that if they took that decision before COVID, and this 121 was original cost, that's the scope of work. And if you do project management, you do a proper scope of work. The scope of work was 121. Post-COVID, 2023, you are escalating it to 222. So what is this justification that if it had happened after COVID, you didn't have to engage in that project? And if you look at the approval itself, the approval
he said, quote, if you were to be taking the decision today, building a legacy head office would not have been a priority.
But that is untenable because today you are seeking to escalate it from 121 to about 250. That means you could have done the 121. So for me, it's untenable. But even the initial approval was 28th January 2020, in the year of COVID. So I would plead with the bank of the governor. You see, sometimes when you do these things, you end up worsening your case.
Okay.
You end up worsening your case.
Well, you got the governor coming to a press conference and explain things to us. Unfortunately, somehow you don't. Is it fortunately or unfortunately? You don't share in the explanations or justifications that have been given, and therefore your ultimatum stands, and you are still proceeding with your demonstration. Bright, PM Express, Joy News, PM Express had done a certain review of the press briefing and made certain comparisons and discovered certain, as it were, inconsistencies. The Bank of Ghana's income statement, the annual report showed 1.80 as against what the press statement or the special briefing, the governor said 1.60. There are some other figures that they have been able to look at and say, what is happening? The report gives an income statement of a certain amount, but the press briefing appears to lower the amounts. Did you spot that?
In terms of the, I'm not sure I can read your graph clearly because it doesn't have any units on the scales. Are you saying that the profits are lower?
Yes.
We haven't looked at the discrepancy between his press statement and what is in the annual reports, unfortunately.
Okay. You can see, can you? Yes.
Bar.
So the yellow bar is the annual report.
Yes.
Those are the figures from the annual report. And the white is the press briefing, the figures.
Okay,
that
inconsistencies.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah.
So I think, Brian, he's saying that there's inconsistency between what he presented and what is contained in official documents. I guess that's what Samson is trying to put up.
Exactly.
Oh, in terms of the profit numbers, the actual profit numbers. Okay, there are two ways that will arise. I don't know for sure whether you are comparing like for like. So is it the Bank of Ghana group versus the Bank of Ghana itself, the bank, or so if there is the discrepancy in that mode. So for example, if it's not for instance the fact that one document is quoting the Ghana Bank of Ghana group and the other is quoting the bank, then this would be quite unusual.
Okay. But having listened to your friends and having also listened to the government spokesperson on these matters, what will be the brief intervention you make before we take a quick break?
So I think the issue around the building, Mr. Pebu was of the view that we have to compare it with similar projects and then try and strike a balance, which is very sensible. Except that we have done that. When you look at the way the Bank of Ghana likes to use the benchmark square meter, cost per square meter number, they do that assuming that the entire project is at a prestige high-rise flat, high-rise tower block, right? So then you use the $2,700 and it looks reasonable. Except that it's not. A lot of the project is not a high-rise prestige tower block. It's a lot of car parks, and other ancillary.
So the comparison cannot be.
The other thing that is also important is that why does the Bank of Ghana need to more than increase the amount of space it needs by more than 7 times? In 2003, total employees in the Bank of Ghana was just a little above 1,600. It took 13 years for that number to rise to 1,900, a little above 1,900. So in more than a decade and a half, or nearly a decade and a half, you've increased staff numbers by 300 people, which is actually less than 20% in more than a decade and a half. In between 2016 to 2023, you've increased staff strength by about 300, from 1,900 thereabouts to 2,200 thereabouts. It's very evident that it takes you more than 30 years by these projections to double your staff count. Why will you need to build something that is nearly 7 times what your current needs are in terms of square meter area by square meter, measured by square meters? So those are the kind of analysis that we have to do. And then we come to the conclusion that this is too big, too expensive, especially because also the current revision takes away all the valuable things that they claim were essential. Because of the fact that they are so over budget, they decided to take out the data center, they decided to take out the currency processing center, they decided to take out all the specialized security systems. So what you have is far inferior than what you originally set out to do. And yes, still it's going to cost us nearly $400 million if current rates of cost overruns continue. I don't see the logic. Why would you build something that is not significantly better than what you have now in terms of features, the valuable features? And yes, still it's so much bigger, and you don't have the staff to actually do. Of course, you can talk about the fact that they may rent places, etc. But they claim it's a national security site. So that would limit the amount of rentals that you can do, etc.
Okay.
So I think that there's a lot of analysis that can be done to show that not enough thought has gone into this.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we take a break, Kabiru, what do you have to say? I understand that you want to respond to one or two things. I'll give you a minute. Do that quickly.
Yeah, Samson, Council, I hope you give me 2 minutes because everyone in the studio is, against this particular
Yeah, you can't be responding to everyone. Just respond to one or two issues quickly.
I have the opportunity to respond to all of them, so I will just beg of you to provide us.
Please go ahead quickly, and I'm timing you.
Yeah, the first issue has to do with the distortion of the governor's statement that he had known that COVID was around the corner. We shouldn't attribute his statement to COVID. He stated, and that was in corner, if things were like today, if they knew they were going to post loss for that particular year, which came as hindsight because it is based on, the reporting system. So we shouldn't misinterpret the government statement to mean that there were already writings on the wall that he should have known that COVID is at the corner. COVID was there and the governor or the bank was making profit. So let's put that statement in context. The second issue has to do about the cost of that particular project. I'm happy at least for that one, there is, split of air. People is on that particular side of the cost and Brasimo on the side. I don't want to go there, but if we are going into the cost, and let's look at comparable buildings, and that's the only good measure we can use. The last thing is about the demonstration and then the calling of the governors for the governor's resignation. Look, we shouldn't create a situation where we would use illegal means, where we use backdoors to have people removed. The
demonstration is constitutional. It's not illegal.
The removal of a central bank government, the statute and the manner and ground is conterminous with the justice of the Superior Court. You know that, okay? So if you want to remove a governor of a central bank, go under Article 146. Okay, if you
that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways. Every citizen has the right under Chapter 5 of the Constitution to demonstrate and make a protest. They don't have to go and say, we are filing a petition for the removal of a judge because we don't like this judge. They can do a demonstration. So it's up to them. I think you can't fault them on that.
Council, the truth is that the Constitution provides safeguard and the protection of this. And in the contemplation of the framework of the Constitution, they know that citizens can rise up one day and want someone being called up. And that's why they provided that if you want the justices of the Superior Court to be removed, go through this process. And if you want the governor of the central bank to be removed, go through this particular process. Of course, demonstrations are part of civil rights of people to express their displeasure. And to that extent, I allow it. But if you want to remove the governor of the central bank, there's a way to go about it. And you know that if they don't come through that way and they are using all these particular backdoors as a means or conduit to get him out, it is going to be unfortunate. Come to think of it, one day, a group of Ghanaians rising up to say that the CJ, the Chief Justice, we don't like him. So we do demonstration and we'll control the demonstration for him to remove. We don't run a country that way. And we should protect the institution of the governor that has been created by the Constitution and the constitutional safeguards that have been provided for his protection should be regarded.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we're praying for long life so that in case the NDC is in power and things happen and there are, as it were, legal means by which one can trigger a removal, we will not hear you join the NPP say you are demonstrating. We'll take a quick break, and then when we return, we will first look at the question whether or not the Parliamentary Select Committee, headed by Atachia, have saved the country $1.5 billion from the GMPC Gensa deal, or rather, that is a loss they have caused the country, according to Imani and ASEP. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. My guest, Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa, joining us by Zoom. And we had also Dr. Abdul Tia Kabiru Mahama, who also joins us via Zoom. He's member, New Patriotic Party Communications Team, economist and technical advisor at the Office of the Vice President. In the studio, John Abdullahi Jinapo, MP Yape Kusogu, and former Deputy Power Minister Martin Kpebu is lawyer and rights activist. We'll share a few of your messages with you, and then we go to the matter of the GENSA. A news file is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, roofing, Papa Fie. My Way, dial *165# on MTN to join My Way today. And Syntex Tanks, it's strong, it's tough. Flamingo Paints, simply superior. And don't forget that we are giving you also a comprehensive coverage all day. Actually started last night with the superior analysis by the great political team, Evans Mensah and Winston Amwa on Joy News. And that analysis will continue as the voting for who will qualify as the 5, for the November delegates conference of the NPP. That will also continue. And as you watch from time to time, when some significant persons have been to cast their ballots, we share with you. Not too long ago, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the Vice President, had also been to the voting venue to vote. Some minutes before him was the President himself also casting his ballot. It's a very busy day for the NPP today, determining out of the 10 hopefuls or candidates who will qualify to be voted on for the flag bearership eventually to contest the 2024 elections. K. Amwa says BOG managing reserves is making losses. Cocoa Board buying and selling cocoa is making losses. The ECG buying and selling power is making losses. All these point to the fact that our current trajectory needs a change. Sometimes it's Mr. Rhetorician. Is that your name? Okay, he says the governor's dismissal of the bank's recent losses as a mere technicality insults our intelligence, and choosing luxury over the well-being of citizens during this time of unprecedented economic crisis is never a reasonable decision. Atofosu J, a question the governor of the central bank should be asked is, quote, if a bank declares such loss, would the bank be allowed to operate, end quote, considering what happened during the banking sector cleanup 5 years ago? M.A. Seydu Jr., the governor's explanation is unacceptable. All Ghanaians need from him is to resign. He took over banks for far lesser issues. He is not special. Mektashi, for me, I see this whole Bank of Ghana and its governor issue as a broader scheme of things. The man has no moral right to still be at post, even if we take away the now headquarters building case. How he manages both the fiscal and monetary policy has given him away long time ago. This one from Alhaji Suleiman. He says, it's sad when managers of state institutions explain everything away, blame everything but themselves. When that happens, our institutions will not grow since the managers see no fault on their part. Is the BOG saying they have absolutely no blame whatsoever as far as this cliff fall in Ghana is concerned? If the banking sector was strengthened by the clean-up exercise, then we shouldn't have fallen the way we have. Our cliff fall is a clear evidence of policy failure, and the BOG must take responsibility. Let's get serious. Okay. Thank you for your messages. Keep sending them. So the simple question we are asking you is, are you satisfied with the justifications, defenses that the Bank of Ghana and its governor have given the country over the 60.8 billion loss, historic, catastrophic, that they have made, and the 250 million US dollars headquarters building that they are putting up? Are you satisfied with those explanations? And also, we are going to the next issue of the GENSA matter. Tell us where you stand. Do you believe in the report of the CSOs or the parliamentary group that says it was a savings rather than a loss? Once again, let's go and begin with Bright Simmons. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the Parliamentary Select Committee on Mines and Energy has stated that the country saved 1.5 billion from the gas sales agreement between the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, and the GENSA Energy Ghana Limited. The contract is to deliver 329 million metric British thermal units of gas to the GNPC for 16 years. The committee says the sales agreement would also reduce the transmission losses by 480 million US dollars when the Ameri plant is relocated to Kumasi and made operational. The parliamentary probe follows criticisms by some civil society organizations last year that the arrangement or the agreement would cause financial loss to the state. The committee said in its report that after a careful evaluation of testimonies from stakeholders, including Imani and ASEP, the country would derive some benefit from the sales agreement. But Imani and ASEP that have paid attention and assessed the agreement say that Ghana bought gas for 95.8 million US dollars and sold same to the GENSA Ghana Limited for 43.5 million US dollars, accounting for the 1.5 billion financial loss to the state. Bright, how did you guys arrive at this?
Thank you very much. And I think it's important that we also emphasize from the outset that this is the chairperson's report. And as I'm sure it will become evident, this is not really the committee's report. So to start off, we are talking about gas. And it's important that we understand the connection between gas and the ordinary person. Gas is really in Ghana electricity. We used to have a huge amount of power that was produced by hydro, so essentially water, in Akosombo Dam and Pond Dam, etc. And then over the years, we've shifted more and more to thermal, which is essentially fossil fuels. And in that category of fossil fuels, gas today is almost 99% or something like that of all the fuel we need. In fact, as a country, we plan to move hydro to strategic industries like Valco and things like that, and to move almost exclusively to gas until 2050, where we expect nuclear power to become the dominant form of power here. So in simple terms, gas is so important to electricity production. So when you think gas, you think electricity. The other point that is important is the prices are important because the price of the fuel feeds directly into the price of the electricity. For some of the entities in the value chain, some of the big ones like VRA, fuel can be the biggest cost because they get a good chunk of their generation from hydro as well. When you take the gas cost component, it becomes extremely critical. Maybe 70% of all their costs. sometimes can be fuel driven. So in short, there is a huge issue about how much we sell the gas for, how much gas costs the sector, and the price of the power that we get. In 2021, from 2019 onwards, a series of contracts have been signed in Ghana that has allowed a company called Gensa, it's an American company that's a subsidiary in Ghana, and it was founded by Ghanaians, but it's based in the US. And this company has managed to acquire massive discounts on how much it buys the gas for. And here is just basically the pricing of the gas as time has evolved. So he started off paying $2.79 when it signed the first contract with GNPC. GNPC is Ghana's main oil company, petroleum company. And then because of the basis that is building some pipelines, that price was supposed to be dropped further to $1.72. So bear these numbers in mind, they are very important. For every unit of gas, Gensa is now entitled by the contract to pay $1.72 for every unit of gas. What does Gensa do? It takes the gas that is given and it pipes the gas to power plants that is located near 6 major gold mines in the country and produces power and sells to the mines. It also has a power facility, similar thing with Unilever. I'm not sure if that is still up to date, but at some point, it had a power plant in one of the Unilever's factories, or close to one of Unilever's factories, where it sold power to Unilever. And now it also hopes to take some of this gas, convert it into a liquid, and export it out of the country. So it's very important that we get an understanding of how Gensa uses the gas that it gets. It's a commercial company. It takes the gas from state-owned companies like GNPC. It uses it to produce power that it sells to some gold mines, and some power that it expects in the coming year or so to convert into liquids and then export out of the country. According to the committee, there is really no problem. Gas, at the time that this company got its deal, gas was being sold on average at or gas cost on average $6.08 in Ghana. What that means is that all the gas that we produce in 3 main gas fields in Ghana, Sankofa, Jubilee, and TEN, the price of the Jubilee and TEN are determined through negotiations with those companies led by Tullow. Then we get some gas from Sankofa, Ginyame, and that is led by Eni, it's an Italian company. We decide, we have a contract with them that determines the prices, and those prices we kind of strike an average. We also get some gas from Nigeria, and when you take the prices by the volume, based on the volume, and then you strike an average, you get a price of what gas costs Ghana, which is around $6. We sell it to the company at $1.72, used to be $2.79. And the argument of the committee is that the reason why there's a difference is that the company also provides a service to GNPC, the one selling the gas, the Ghanaian-owned, the state-owned company selling the gas to the company. The company provides some service to them. Now, the services are in twofold, and it's important that we explain it clearly. In one leg, they are saying that the company uses its own pipeline to take the gas from GNPC. And so GNPC does not spend money to build a gas pipeline to the company's facilities. And therefore, the company has expended some costs. Secondly, GNPC has also signed a contract with the company saying that it would like to use some of that pipeline capacity, some of the space in the pipeline, to send gas to some of its customers. So when you strike the balance, the company then gets paid. So you just subtract and you get the price that the company pays. So it's almost like I sell you something, you sell me something, and in order for us to strike out the net price, we get this $2.79 that has now become $1.72 according to the contract. It doesn't make any sense, the argument that the committee is making. It's very good that it's not the committee that is making the argument, it's the chairperson making the argument. Because I will try and explain it further on with this bread analogy. And I'll start by saying that think of a bakery, and I'll come back to it later, but think of a bakery. It makes bread. It gets flour from somewhere. Then it makes bread. And then once it gets the bread, it sells it to a restaurant. The restaurant then sells the bread to sells it to a supermarket. The supermarket then sells it to a number of restaurants. The argument that the committee is making is that if I sell the bread to the supermarket and you decide that you go and pick it from a depot there, the cost of picking it from the depot there versus me bringing the bread all the way to you, we should strike the difference. Also, the cars that I'm using to bring the bread from that depot to your place, if you reserve space in that car, then that price will somehow net out. That's basically the committee's argument. And we'll come back to this bread analogy again to explain why that makes no sense at all in this arrangement. The other point to note is that gas in Ghana, like I've already explained, is valuable. It's not like we are washing gas, we have surplus gas, we don't know what to do with it. Today, 10, which is one of the 3 oil fields we have in Ghana, it's not been exporting gas in the last couple of months. So most of the gas we get it from Jubilee and then Sankofa and the gas that we get from Nigeria. The fact that we have to bring some gas from Nigeria into the country tells you that we are not self-sufficient in gas. The fact that the gas prices from Nigeria is very high, it's over $8 or whatever, gives you an idea of what you would get if you were doing an arm's length transaction. And the fact that the gas that we also get from Sankofa is typically high, reaching $10 at some point, it tells you that the average price of gas in Ghana can never be less than $7 for a very long time going into the future. So that's also an important point. The cost of gas in Ghana will not drop below $7 for a very long time due to the contracts that we have and due to the nature of the gas industry at present. So today, the average cost of gas has moved from since when the contract was agreed, when it was $6.808. Today, it has moved to $8.122. That's the average cost of gas in Ghana. From the ones that we produce, and each of those fields has a contract-based price, and the one that we bring from Nigeria, when you strike the average, it's $8.122. So that number is very important because you are selling to Gensa according to the contract based on new pipelines they built and completed. It should now cost Gensa $1.72. And before those pipelines were completed, it cost them $2.79. The committee's argument is based on a certain, technical term that they've, I think belatedly embraced, called net backing. The IMF itself, its fiscal affairs department, has a model on net backing, which is really useful. And I think that the committee have done this work as it should have. And I'm not saying it hasn't, because like I've explained, this is the chairperson's account of what happened at the committee. You will realize that the argument that they are trying to make is that you need to set the net back all the way to a point where you get a loss at cost recovery point, which makes no sense. Essentially, what they are saying is that if you pick up the bread from the depot, or instead of picking up the bread from the factory, there should be a discount. And we should base that discount on the logic that if we're bringing the bread from our bakery all the way to your location, we'll have paid money for transport, we'll have hired a vehicle. So for that reason, the cost should be discounted. That doesn't make sense. If I sell my bread at 10 cedis, and you ask me to bring it to a certain location, I'll add the price of the transport to that location. If you now say that, oh, actually, I want to send it to my customers who are restaurants, so send it to those restaurants, that added cost should simply be added to the cost of the bread. So in the end, I will charge you 13 cedis. Net backing simply means that when I'm trying to compare how much I actually make on the bread, there's another bakery, I will take away those transport costs to get 10 cedis. So that the comparison between me and another bakery who is delivering to maybe less distance and getting 11 cedis is not distorted because I'm getting 13 cedis. So it's a simple way of saying that take away your cost margins. Cost margins doesn't mean go into the actual price of the item and discount that item also further. So instead of selling the bread at 10 cedis, which is what it costs you to produce plus your small margin, reduce the price to 5 cedis because somebody have said that they have a car that will pick up the bread and therefore you don't have to take the bread. It's as simple as that. And when you look at all the net backing models that the IMF and others use, nobody makes a claim that the commodity itself now has to be discounted. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We'll go to the issue around whether or not, because GNPC also wants to use the car that carries the bread around, we should apply a cost discount to that car and use that to also discount the price of the bread. We'll come to that in a moment. Here is the bread analogy again. I make bread. The cost that goes into some flour, some butter, etc. Nobody can change those prices. Whether you have a car or not doesn't come in. It costs me a certain amount to buy the flour, to buy the butter, or the margarine or whatever to make the bread. When I finish doing that cost, I deliver it to a certain depot. In Ghana, the equivalent is that we buy the gas from Nigeria at over $8. We buy from Sankofa at over $8. We buy at Jubilee around $3 or something like that. When you strike the average, you get to something like $8. We then deliver it to Prestea, which is the depot. It costs some money. Once you add all of that money together, That is our cost. We may add some service charge and things like that. That may bring us to something like $9. If you are Gensa and you say you have some customers, this is the restaurants, they are at Damai, they are Takwa, they are elsewhere, you should take the gas there. We will simply charge you extra. If you've decided to build your own pipeline to carry the gas over to those customers, the only thing you can claim is that we cannot charge you for that extra distance because you are now responsible for your own cost and you borrowed money to build your own pipeline, etc., etc. That is the simple issue that the committee has completely misunderstood, according to the chairperson. And when you look at the way we price the gas in Ghana, this is the June tariff, how we price gas in Ghana in June. We've increased the price in August to $8.112. In June, when you use the exchange rate that makes sense, we're charging about $7-something. If you use another exchange rate, it's about $6.5. You will see that the cost of the commodity is the one top there. The price of the actual gas is over 60-something pesos. You can then look at some of the other costs that delivers the gas to the main depot, the national interconnection transmission system, and people come and pick it from. When you look at those costs, and then you look at the cost that it costs to deliver the gas to the various power plants that buy from Ghana Gas, it gives you a rough idea of what the average transportation cost should be. You can see those numbers in the second schedule in the middle. When you discount, you look at it, there's nothing that says that if all of a sudden those costs in the middle, the ones to do with the transport were not there, we should go back to the cost of the commodity and take money from that one as well. Nothing like that makes sense. All you can say is that if you are not going to use Ghana Gas infrastructure, then don't add the Ghana gas costs, the ones in the middle, because you're not using their pipelines. And you can take some out. When you do that calculation, rough calculation, you will still see that even in June, your cost for the gas alone would have been around $6 without any of the transportation elements. And today, it will be over $7. The other point is that we have cost for transportation in Ghana. So we can use that to get an idea of what will happen if we were simply saying that we're not charging them any transportation cost at all. But here is the funny thing. Look at the map very carefully. This is the map of how gas gets delivered in Ghana. The top left corner is where the power plants which Gensa owns, and where the gas is being delivered at. When you look at that thing very carefully, something very clear becomes apparent. Is Gensa telling us that if GNPC in an arm's length transaction was building a pipeline all the way to their customers to deliver the gas, GNPC would not have charged them extra? So if they have built power plants in a certain location and gas is being delivered there, why should that become a cost that you pass on to GNPC rather than to your customers? It's your customers that you are delivering the thing to. So essentially, you are saying that rather than you charge the restaurant for delivering the bread from the supermarket depot, you will charge the bakery because you are using your own car to send the bread to your own customers. It makes no sense. And that really is what we are dealing with. This matter will be addressed.
Okay.
The way you can also, two quick points. The other thing is that before Gensa got into this deal, Gensa used to have contracts in Ghana with Ghana Gas and used its own pipelines and was paying about $7 at one point. It used to have a contract with Vitol, and Vitol was bringing the gas to it at the port and it was carrying the gas to its own power plants. It used to pay Vitol. There was no discount. Gensa does not have a transmission license, so it cannot operate the second leg of the transaction, which is to charge GNPC for reserving capacity. Secondly, the pipeline that it has leads to its customers, not GNPC's customers. So you cannot use that as a basis at GNPC additional money, when in fact it's not already paying Ghana Gas for the cost of delivering the gas to the main depot. It owes Ghana Gas over $50 million, which it has refused to pay as far back as 2019. These are critical issues which we cannot simply gloss over. And the simple fact of the matter is that the cost of the gas must be recovered. If Gensa is not going to pay for it, then the government has to enter a proper discussion with the entire community, including policy analysts, about subsidy arrangements that make sense and it's a fair playing field. What is happening right now is that Gensa is taking customers from the likes of VRG, ECG, and the rest because of this notion that it has cheaper gas and therefore can undercut them. That cannot be allowed to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bright Simmons, with his presentation on this Gensa GNPC deal, which they show with evidence, which they say they submitted to this parliamentary committee, that shows that this is really bad, the manner in which they were approaching. And yet the chairman's report, quote unquote, is the one that seems to suggest otherwise. We'll take a quick break. We'll return. John Jinapor is also on this as well. and we'll hear Martin as well. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And you just heard Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa, making a presentation on why this deal is bad in the manner in which it has been presented, if it concludes in that way. We will hear from John Abdullahi Jinapor now, and then my other guests will also share their views on these matters. So send us your messages on this matter, whether or not you take the views of the civil society or the Parliamentary Select Committee. We are told by the civil society that Ghana bought gas for $95.8 million and is sold to Gensa Energy Ghana Limited for $43.5 million. And that eventually will account for a loss of $1.5 billion to the state. Yes, John. You are in Parliament. You are in this committee. You are supposed to watch and ensure that we get value for money and the country is not shortchanged. Why are we now in the media complaining about what we should ensure is done at the committee?
Thank you very much, Samson. First of all, I'm the ranking member on the committee. The ranking member is seen as the leader of the minority side in Parliament.
That's right.
You know, Parliament, we have two sides. The chairman normally comes from the majority side. And so in this case, the chairman is Honorable Atachian. Let me also put on record that Imani and ASEP did not petition Parliament. That is important. That for me is very, very important. It's not as if they petitioned Parliament and said, we've petitioned you, these are our allegations. The committee picked sentiments from across the country and decided that, look, we must go into this matter. And so from day one, I held the view that it's an issue of value for money. For me, that's all. Is there value for money in the contract? And so I kept insisting that don't pigeonhole yourself. So for instance, Imani says the loss is 1.5 billion. I calculated and got about 1.2 billion. But in terms of material substance, there isn't much difference. Is there a loss or not? So if you go and do the computation and your loss is, say, 1.5 or 1.4, then you say, because Imani said it's 1.5, if I got 1.4, they are wrong, that is it. You don't draw that kind of conclusion. That is one. I've just sent you a document. And in this analysis, I want to depend solely on the official document. I don't even want to bring my personal. Look at what the chairman says. Testimony of Ministry of Energy. The ministry did not know the gas price achieved under the GNPC Gensa agreement. This is what the ministry is telling us, that they don't even know that the ministry did not have a copy of the agreement. The ministry cannot authenticate the agreement as it stands. Now, what I sent you is what GNPC sent to us. See, GNPC, this official from GNPC. This is what GNPC says. That on 14 February, the Ministry of Energy communicated an EMT decision. 14 February 2020, the ministry communicated to GNPC that GNPC is now the gas aggregator. Ghana Gas is no more the gas aggregator. And in the energy sector, I don't want to deal with too many technicalities. You have upstream, downstream. GNPC is an upstream company. They are supposed to look for oil, exploration and production. Ghana Gas is supposed to transport the oil. It's at the midstream or downstream. Government decided that Ghana Gas shouldn't do that job again. And the GNPC should now do that job. So that is where the first problem comes. So on 24 February, GNPC then signs this agreement with Ghana Gas. And this is what GNPC tells us at committee. And for me, that is very, very important, that the Ministry of Energy wrote to GNPC Let me just read that for you. That Ministry of Energy wrote to GNPC to renegotiate the gas agreement. And yet at committee, the ministry says they know nothing about that. That alone should send a signal. But you see, let me just break this down quickly so that we can deal with the gas price according to GNPC itself. Is captured here. Contract price, US dollar per MMBTU, 2.7. That's what they are saying. Now they renegotiate it and say extend the pipeline to Kumasi. And when you extend the pipeline to Kumasi, how much are you going to pay? They are going to pay one Gensa contract price, 1.76.
You said 2.7.
No, I'm talking about what GNPC submitted to us. Contract price, 2.79. Is here.
Okay, 2.79.
2.79.
Yeah.
Without the Kumasi pipeline.
Right.
Now with the Kumasi pipeline, Gensa would now pay 1.7. Is here. Gensa contract price, 1.7. So I told the chairman, our main focus should be that, can we pay for the gas we've procured? Simple. With this price, if you procure the gas from the IOCs, which is the international oil companies, can we pay them? If there's a deficit, how do you deal with that? And if we have done that, our job is finished.
Can you explain again to me briefly why we purchase and sell to a company?
Because you purchase the raw gas. The gas comes in raw form. It comes with certain elements that you need to process at Atuabo. So the IOCs, which is the Jubilee and those things, theirs is that when the gas leaves the flange, they are done. Ghana Gas then takes and process. Jinyami has a processing plant on board. But the Ghana needs that gas. So we exercise a first right of refusal or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
That we need the gas to power our plants. The IOC says, okay, then I need a guaranteed price. So we negotiate and we've agreed. So we've agreed with Sankofa, we've agreed with TEN, we've agreed with Jubilee. Then PRC then takes those prices, because the prices are not the same, and apply some weight to them and do a weighted average and say that in order that the value chain is paid, currently PRC says you should sell the gas at $8.1. Anything short of the $8.1, boss, there is a deficit. That is the whole thing. Me, look, I don't even see the controversy here at all. PURC has done the computation and says the raw gas, the processing, the transportation, and everything pay 8.1. This contract says that it's first premised on 4.2. Is here, DDIT. 4.2. So there's a huge differential. And then Gensa will deduct its money and eventually give GNPC 1.7. Meanwhile, the commodity as we speak today is about $5. The raw commodity, or minimum $4. So if you take 1.7, let's even assume it's $2. And you are supposed to pay the gas at $4. How do you pay it? That's what the committee should deal with. And the chairman goes to write this report. We disassociate ourselves from the report. It's baseless.
So this is not the
factually
end.
inaccurate. No, because, and that's where I'm happy. On the last day of Parliament, I moved a motion before the Speaker. And the Speaker said he wants to hear from the chairman before he makes the referral. The chairman said he has no problem, he agrees. So the Speaker then referred this matter to two committees, Finance Committee and then the Mines and Energy Committee. I hold the view that there was no need to even rush with this report. When the Speaker has made that referral.
Hold on. The chairman of the committee, Samuel Atachia, joins us. Thank you very much. I meant to say he has spoken to us about his position. Let's hear him.
And I keep saying that Rankin is daring me to expose him. If you see, he's becoming duplicitous and it's mendacious posture. If he pushes me, I will expose him. Because at the end of the day, the report was put on a platform in which all the members of the committee had the opportunity to look at and give their input. Thereafter, we converged one-on-one. We all seated together. And he came out with the same errors. He didn't even appreciate that there was an interpretation section to the amended, gas sales agreement. It was an underdog of the committee, somebody who's never been a minister, who showed him that you are totally wrong. And he buckled. Thereafter, he said, okay, he accepted the fact that Iman and Asef were wrong. And these are matters that we have it on the platform. I'm trying to respect the protocols of Parliament, because if anybody wants to say that Atachia has a posture of trying to be dictatorial, and then I sat in my bedroom and wrote a report, I'm going to expose this gentleman. And I'm warning him on this platform. For example, he's just told, the whole world that in relation to the referral of these matters to the Joint Committee of Mines and Energy and then Finance, ended his motion. I was not in the chamber to second the motion. Where is it coming from? What motion was it that I was in the chamber? I didn't even know that he's moved the motion. And subsequently, I came to the chamber and I got to hear that, because he was dissatisfied with the sole position he took and was defeated by his own members. Honorable Bua was there.
All right. So that's his reaction. But there appears to be some evidence that is being proffered that he was actually there and that it is not the case that he wasn't there. So it looks like we may not end this matter here. What do you say?
Chairman sent me a message that he wasn't even in the chamber. I sent him the video.
Okay.
Not pictures, video.
Right.
Of he, the chairman, supporting my motion. You see, Atachia, he's treading a very dangerous path. He says, Bua disagreed with me at the committee. This is Honorable Bua's statement, where Honorable Bua says that he disagrees with the chairman.
And read it. You're still here on the news file. We have just some 6 minutes to bring the show to a close. But remember that our...
See what, Honorable? It is therefore unfortunate that the chairman of the Mines and Energy Committee rushed with the report to the public domain with that, while pending a new referral. Signed, Honorable Emmanuel Amakofi Bua. The minority is concerned about the agreement, which does not ensure transparency in the pricing of the gas.
All right.
This is Bua. And yet, the chairman says that Honorable Bua disagreed with me. But you see, my position is simple. No matter how you look at this agreement, from an objective point of view, there's a deficit. Look, irrespective of how you look at it.
So what should happen to it?
I'm saying that let's point that out. That there's a deficit. If it's possible to renegotiate it, renegotiate it. If it's not possible, at least let the truth and the basic facts be put before the ordinary Ghanaian.
Thank you.
It's as simple as that.
The last few minutes, I'll donate that to Martin Pebu, because he hasn't had the opportunity of speaking. But Martin, I plead with you. I want Bright, if you are there, just 1 minute. What for you do you see to be the way forward on this issue, Bright?
Yes, as the honorable gentleman has said, we must acknowledge there's under recovery. How we deal with that under recovery is a matter of creative policy making. The situation we have now is this refusal to accept that the country is making a loss. We cannot make progress until that clarity is established.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, Martin.
Sam, I prefer to wrap up on the Bank of Ghana matter, because I've seen some things that I think will help our governance. Number one, when I check the Federal Reserve in the U.S., they give the directors, the governors, Board of Governors, a 14-year staggered term. So this one's, maybe Sam, you're a governor, yours starts this year, JJ's own starts next year. So it's staggered. So the main thing is that you find that governments come and go. So it kind of gives them some independence. You check Bank of Ghana Act Section 10, they give you 3 years renewable. No. It's not good. It's not good. We need an amendment of the Bank of Ghana Act. Give people, the experts, longer terms, especially so that they outlive the politicians. They outlive. And then 2, there should be transparency. When they take decisions, the monetary committee, they should publish them, the minutes, etc. And then number 3, the IMF. Look, we are struggling. You know, Bank of Ghana did all these things because of the IMF conditionalities. We are asking the IMF to look at the way they do their business. Once again, this thing didn't start today. You know, under the new International Economic Order, 1978 and 1981, developing countries pushed. They wanted a new UN bank that would lend on proper terms. You read this book, Kojo Koram and Commonwealth, Britain and the Aftermath of Empire. You go to page 135 and you see that point. And I read just a little bit. It says Thatcher and Reagan shut down the idea of a UN bank to lend to developing countries at better rates than the IMF and the World Bank, with Thatcher declaring that such a bank would not succeed within an institution like the UN, where developing countries held the numerical advantage, blah, blah, blah. Then you go on. So the point is that, look, this new international economic order, we are back to it. I think yesterday the president made a point at the BRICS meeting in South Africa. And developing countries, we should push again. IMF is killing us. IMF is killing us. The only lack is that, you see, because the president's, he was arrogant, he would not mind anybody. So when he fell into the ditch last year, we were jubilating. But we forgot that we're the people to be harmed. I think now, since we are all feeling the hunger, millions of our citizens have fallen into this poverty again, the 850,000 new poverty numbers. I think, look, government should engage IMF. They should look at how to go about this. We are dying. Because, Sam, the hunger is a big problem. Right. It's a big problem.
Thank you very much, Martin Pebu. And my other guests have been Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President Imani Africa, John Abdullahi Junapor is MP, Yape Kusogu, and former Deputy Power Minister. We earlier spoke to Dr. Abdul Tia Kabiro, who is Mahama, who is member New Patriotic Party Communications Team, economist and technical advisor at the Office of the Vice President. Were unable to deal with the matter of the EC's decision to limit the venues for the registration of new voters. Is hoping to get about 1.3 million new voters onto the voters' roll. Its decision to limit that exercise to only 8 district offices, which the parties appear unanimous across the board against. So we should be able to canvass that matter for you next time. I'm Samson Ladia Nyanini, and my outfit, as always, is by Habil Scooter. You can find Habil Scooter as at Jiringano Gate, East Legon. You can call them 0200 84 1988. 84 1988. They make the best of kaftans, including stuff like what I'm wearing right now. And as you know, the Super Delegates conference is voting of the NPP to shortlist the 10 aspirants to 5 is ongoing, and Joy is bringing you a comprehensive coverage. And you can see MFR Apau in your shot, ready to continue with the coverage. MFR, take it over.